Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to a butchering discussion and demonstration and tasting as well.
Oh, yeah.
For us at least, for Young Farmers and Cooks Conference today. My name is Adam Kay. Help run the meat processing program at Stone Barns, along with Jose Morquecho, who's our head butcher, and Paul Hargrove, who likewise oversees all meat processing and farmer relations and supply here at Stone Barns. Um, there's a slight change, I think, in the title that you might have seen. Same idea though of what today's demonstration is going to be talking about. Where have all the good cuts gone? How do we maximize yield, flavor, and value? Um, the point being, and we don't have a lot of time today, the point being is really looking at how we break down a whole carcass, in this case beef, and how we tend to lose so much great meat and so much value and so much flavor um, because we really tend to focus on particular cuts, and the rest are really kind of cuts that end up in ground beef at stew meat, usually not getting wasted, but really is it the highest calling for these pieces of meat. So with that in mind, we'll also be hearing a little bit later on from one of our farmers at Stone Barns, talking a little bit about the meat program specifically, the livestock program specifically. Just want to start off with a couple of slides. I actually snapped these pictures in a supermarket near where I live here in Westchester County. I think a pretty representative meat counter at a supermarket. It was towards the end of the day, so you can see some open spaces there. But what you're seeing really is what I refer to as like the usual suspects, right? You've got filet, you've got skirt steak, you've got ribeye steaks. I'm seeing some sirloins there. Keep moving along the case. Some tomahawk steaks, really large cut ribeyes, um, boneless ribeyes. Really working your way through. These are really I mean, like I said, the usual suspects. 9 out of 10 times you go into a supermarket, these are the cuts you're going to see.
It's like, what percentage of the animal is that?
And yeah, what percentage of the animal is that? And we'll get to that. But it's also the kind of cuts you're going to see on most restaurant menus. Um, and beyond that, what I find interesting as a chef is, and this is just taken from the New York Times cooking website. And you could go anywhere. You could go to Food and Wine. You can go to Food 52. Go online to on social media. Uh, if you look for recipes, and now we're just talking about steaks. If you just look for recipes of steaks, the recipes pretty much mirror the meat in the supermarket. All right, that is really um, uh, the kinds of recipes that we're seeing out there really are um, recipes that utilize the exact same cuts as what we see in the supermarket and sort of your average butchery counter. Um, Again, what we're looking there really is a small portion of the entire animal. And it's a really interesting question as to kind of how we got there. Um, the cuts, as I said, that we're seeing, ribeyes, filet, strip loin, sirloin. You'll probably see flank in there usually. You'll probably see skirt steak. A rare occasion, certain meat counters, you'll see a flat iron steak or a hanger steak showing up. That's about as kind of exotic as you'll get for most of these counters. Uh, the fact is that there's a whole lot more out there. Um, the point that we're going to try and make here is that we really need to start expanding our knowledge of different cuts of meat. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is we're missing out on these great cuts. Number two is are we really maximizing the value of that carcass when we focus so exclusively on these cuts that fetch a pretty high price, when the rest of the animal really is turning into burger meat or stew meat or kebab meat, let's say. Um, and how do we do this? Like, what is the role of the butcher, the chef, the farmer in really trying to change this culture around meat eating and meat consumption and how we cut meat? So that really ultimately what we are getting towards is let's see if I can switch this to the next slide, is really cuts like these, which ultimately, this is sort of a very dumbed-down version of the kind of meat counter we would want to see in the future. That sits right alongside all these cuts, like a picanha or a chuck eye steak, or pieces of or ground meat that is actually not some random bits that are being ground up, but almost named ground meat, whether it is part of the brisket or part of the short rib or part of the leg. Cutting things like beef shanks into ossobuco, bone in, bone out. Really, why is there why should it be impossible for us to get to the point where these sorts of cuts of meat um, really start to take center stage as much as a ribeye or a filet mignon? Paul, just to you quickly. So we need this new meat counter, but what do you see? And Paul's an interesting guy because he's also worked in meat sales and sort of large scale meat sales for butcher shops and restaurants. Where is that challenge? Where's that disconnect between getting from a ribeye to some of these lesser
Yeah,
known cuts of meat?
I think, I mean, where did the challenges begin? So it's quite a question, but you know, I think it all starts with education, obviously. I think which is good for all of us and what we're talking about here today. But when you see that typical meat counter, and like we talked about, it's, you know, maybe 10% of the animal, maybe, you know, less even. And then you know, how do we get from the retail side? How do we get the retail side to begin to look at it as an educational value, like educational value perspective? So
Could create a demand.
and
Create pull.
it will create demand by creating something exciting and trending and unique for the consumer on the other side of that retail counter. And that, you know, it starts with the chefs, it starts with the farmers, and then feeds down to the people behind the counters, and then it'll feed to the consumer itself. And where does that begin? Oh man, I mean,
Well, it begins right here. It's really where it begins. It begins through discussions like this of how do we, knowing how to get these cuts from an animal, and that's where you have an incredible butcher like Jose, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, um, and then teaching people so that, for example, you know, if you love or you're familiar with skirt steak, and that's sort of your go-to steak, I don't know, for a barbecue, or you're making fajitas, that if there's a bavette steak in the meat counter, that you would realize is actually because you would have a conversation with an educated person behind the counter who is able to talk to these cuts of meat, tell you how it cooks up, tell you some of the characteristics of it, you realize, well, maybe actually a bavette is something that I could use in place of or in addition to a skirt steak. To really go down so we can find these analogs. The other part of this also is really kind of reducing the size of that center cut piece of meat.
yeah.
And realizing that we could eat these smaller portions and get way more variety when we start looking at the carcass and it's in its entirety. So with that in mind, let's switch slides. There you go. So taking this out of the abstract and really kind of bringing it down, really bringing it home, right where we are standing here at the Stone Barn Center, is to look at some cuts of meat. But before we do that, I would thought it'd be really interesting for us just to hear for a few minutes from Claire Forbes, who is one of the livestock team here, and her real focus is actually on cattle and cattle raising here at Stone Barns. Just to give us a little bit of background, a quick background about the cattle program here, the importance of these sorts of ideas, and also just give us a little bit of a background on the particular breed that we're going to be talking about and cutting into in a little while. So, Claire, I know you're in a separate location. If you would like to join
Yes.
us.
Thank you. Thank you for the little introduction. So yes, I focus on our grass finishing program here. This season we finished between 40 and 50 animals, and I know there have been other presentations on some of our management styles, but we do intensive rotational grazing, and that means fresh pasture every day for our livestock and our cows. Since we're finishing year round, through the winter, we'll also supplement with some baleage to make sure that their nutritional needs are being met. One of the great things about finishing year round for us, it means that we can be really hands-on with weighing them and calculating their average daily gains and kind of seeing their progression through the season. So each month we're finishing between 2 or let's say 4 to 6 animals. They'll go in 2 different loads to the processors. And so we'll be able to weigh them. Typical weights of finishing are between 1,100 pounds and 1,250, although some of our larger frame cows are finishing over 1,300 pounds. And they're typically between 24 and 30 months when we're going to slaughter. When we're finishing them, we're looking at how their weight has kind of their gains fluctuation. If the weight has plateaued, we're looking at their frame, their conformation, kind of putting all these pieces together to make sure that we're choosing the right animals at the right time. And so we keep really detailed records of kind of these conformation changes and the average daily gains to make these decisions. So in this picture, you can see one of our main breeds that we're working with right now are the Red Devon. The Red Devon are great to finish on grass. They do really well kind of on hardy forage. So that's definitely a plus for us. Not as popular as like conventional Angus or Hereford, but these guys do really well on this landscape. The Devons have a medium frame, so finishing between 1,100 to 1,200 pounds is pretty typical for them. Genetics wise, they are great for marbling. And really when you're looking at cows and finishing them, your meat can only really ever be as good as the genetics. So choosing those lines is really important, and choosing the right cow for your environment is really important. So that's something that we put a lot of thought into when we're selecting which cows we kind of want to work with from different herds. So then moving forward, we select which ones we want to finish, and we work with 2 different processors. So one is located a half-hour away and the other's an hour and a half. And we're very lucky to have like close relationships with these slaughterhouses. That's not always the case for farmers. So I find that to be kind of a luxury for us sometimes. Once they are dropped off, they'll age at the slaughterhouse for 2 weeks, and they'll come back to us quartered. So we'll go pick them up from the processor and we'll bring them back to Blue Hill. And one of the great things about that is it kind of gives us immediate feedback on what that carcass looks like, and that can help inform us for future decisions when we're thinking about the grazing plan for the following season. It's also great because like a lot of producers don't have that relationship on the backside. If you're not doing kind of direct to consumer marketing, you're not always sure kind of how your animal is being finished and maybe how to make some of those adjustments. Another thing that's really valuable about this relationship is we can be in conversation with Blue Hill about how to tell this story. A lot of time and effort goes into finishing these animals to the best of their ability and at the right time. The yield of the carcass versus the live weight is usually only 50 to 60% of the weight. So it's really important that we make the most of that because so much effort goes into these animals. So having a say in how that story is told and, moving forward, how we can build a stronger relationship, it's a very valuable connection to have. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
and again, really for us in the butchery and in the kitchen, um, our work is so much about really honoring and valuing that process that Claire has just been describing there, especially in a pasture-based system where it's not an unlimited supply over the course of a year of carcasses that are coming in here. Again, how do we really find that greatest value in that carcass and really maximize the yield in a way that really showcases and truly shows the real value of the kind of work that goes into raising these animals. Um, all right, so just very quickly, just to frame now as we start getting a little bit more granular into these cuts here, it's just Paul, if you just wanted to just quickly
Yeah.
run through. I mean, this is obviously probably a little challenging doing a talk like this time around. We've done many butchering talks over the years, not knowing exactly who's in the audience. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with your. This is an incredibly simplified beef chart, but it'll kind of form the framework of the next section of what we're going to do.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's simplified, but it's fairly common. I mean, this is what a lot of people see when you look at a, or something similar to this, when you look at a typical, breakdown of the, of the cow. And I think that when we're talking about finding more valuable cuts within all of these sections, we should need to, a new beef chart needs to be created where we're going to section it down to all the value cuts that you can get from it. Because if we're going to blow through from top to bottom the chuck, I mean, with most places, what are you getting out of the chuck? They're going to throw majority of it in the grind.
yeah,
And that's, yeah, if you're lucky, you'll get the flat iron, you'll get the brisket, you'll get the, and then and of course the rib section, there are less problems with that. But then the loin, just developing the loin's actually the most interesting section, along with the round, where you can actually, we could divide up amongst your more standard cuts to your more interesting cuts, and then breaking down to the leg quarter. Again, you find a lot of that gets turned into stew meat or grind when there's so many more flavorful and tender cuts if you really dig into it and break it down. So I think we need to rethink the entire animal breed.
Well, that's a good segue, I guess, to you, Jose, and to really look at this is, now just pass back to that beef chart. We're now just looking at the front end, the truck, the forequarter of the animal. What do we usually see out of the forequarter? We usually getting, in terms of steaks, we'll get a flat iron if we're lucky. You're getting some roast, you're getting some pot roast, you're getting stew meat, you get the brisket. What else, Jose? If you just look at this over here, let's just take this section right over here. All right. So you want to just describe what we have here?
So basically, what we seen in the picture is that what Paul and I I don't know if we were able to go back to
Sure.
the picture. To the previous one.
Okay, sorry. There you
All
go.
right. All right. So Paul and I, we've been working on something that how much we can get out of the forward part of the animal. So as you can see in the picture, that's the whole front part of the animal, and then I don't know if you guys are able to read from every single pieces. We have ossobucos, we have 2 pieces of eye choke rolls, we have those flat irons, some mock tender steaks. So most of it gets turned into steaks, and plus, if you want to cut it, the shoulder, the shoulder ribs from the front part also, either you cook a whole flat or you can cut into small pieces, and we get the brisket. And after we get in all those steaks that you see in the picture, that's the amount of ground meat we got in there. We almost like 5 pounds of ground meat.
Right.
And so I can
Again,
show you
so
that part.
there are sections there, for example, something like the mock tender or the petit tender,
Yep.
which very frequently, and again, these are muscles that lie very close to the flat iron or the shoulder blade. Incredibly tender, delicious cuts of meat that typically are not making it out into the world as a steak. And again, just think of the price point of a steak versus the price point of ground meat. And again, there will always be ground meat, and there's always plenty of trim and other parts of the animal that one could certainly turn into grind. Again, if we're trying to discover some of these other parts here, it really you start to kind of see the options that are available. So let's just take care of it. So what
Okay,
is that
so-
over there? That's the underblade. What's
Okay, so
the underblade?
yeah, or the dimber steaks,
Well, we'll cut it into
into the
members,
steaks,
exactly.
exactly. So this is one of the pieces that sits on top of the choke roll or high choke of the shoulder. So basically, this is a cap of it. Underneath this is a choke is a choke where you cut into steaks, and this part, of course, the cow is a huge animal. So if you leave this on, if you don't remove this, the eye choke will look on this side thinner, on the next side will be look thinner, and then going for close to the rib part will be like, it will be bigger and bigger and so on, and then you'll get a giant steak that you won't be able to put in a pan. Exactly. So by removing this wonderful piece of steak, we have nice small eye choke steaks, and plus this, which I'm going to turn into steaks at this point.
Something that could be roasted whole. But again, the way we love to do it is to actually to cut it into individual steaks.
Right. As you can see on this front part, it's a little bit thinner. So what I always do, I get like 2 or 3 steaks out of the front part.
So that would be the end of the chuck eye, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Which in itself creates delicious steaks.
Yes. All right. Just from this part, we had counted on the. I think we got like 10 or 15 steaks, just 10 steaks or 15 from just from one side. The other like 20 steaks
Yeah.
we got just from one animal. Yeah. Oh, this looks so beautiful.
Beautiful. That's right. You don't need to cut this, but
Yeah.
so I don't know how easy it is to see this here, but just beautiful, incredible marbling. This is, and we're going to actually bring out some of these that we've cooked on some of these steaks, but just incredible marbling, really tender, deep, delicious flavor. Again, something that most people, I would venture to guess, it's a cut of meat that most people would never would never hear of or get to see in a butcher shop or on a menu. So, we're getting, and these are probably about 5-ounce steaks here. We're going to get about 20 out of just one side of that underblade. So
Yeah.
again,
And view that in a retail counter. I mean, just picture
yeah,
that.
just imagine that
mean-
next to next to a flat iron steak or a rib steak or something like that. But again, really delicious. I don't know why we aren't eating more of this. So that's that's an example of something off the shoulder. Again, as we mentioned, there's mock tenders. There are other cuts as well. The flat iron that we do tend to know about. Just moving forward, the rib section. Again, the rib tends to be there are fewer parts to the rib, essentially, right? When we're looking at that in terms of the different kinds of the variety, right? There's
Yeah.
less variety, and yet there are still some little things in there that we tend to miss, right?
Exactly. So basically going down from the neck, all right? So right now we have the ribeye, where the ribeye steak is. So you can see on the first line, we have the ribeye steaks and then the skirt steaks, followed by the short ribs, and then some of the bones. And again, that's the amount of gram meat we got from all the cuts, like 5 pounds or so. And then the short ribs are cut it into square pieces. That's the amount you can see how much you want, just like, what is it, 1/8 of the animal?
Yeah.
He yells it. And then talking about the part of the on top of the ribeye. The picture is not, I think, is that.
Sort of hard to see,
Yeah,
right?
hard to see it.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the cap of the ribeye. The best way to explain is that this part is really close to the shoulder. All right, when you separate the shoulder and the rib section, where it says stock and rib. So this is the very top of the animal, basically the back of the animal, one side of the back of the animal. This is the close to the center of the spine of the bone.
Yeah.
And this is going down to the short rib.
Okay.
This, to me, it could be used as a like either brace.
Okay.
It's big right now because we removed the short ribs. We could have removed a little bigger, but this could be a nice brace piece of meat. Is about this size, almost like 5 inches of each side.
Great.
So basically, we would be getting 2 pieces of this from one animal.
Okay.
And this is a really tender piece of meat because it sits on very top of the animal near the spine. Basically, it's really part of the ribeye steak.
And you mentioned to me, Jose, that would be the equivalent on a pig of what?
Of the secreto of the pig, yes.
Yeah, so it is, a cut that started getting a lot of attention a few years ago on a pig is called the secreto. What in Spain is called the secreto. It has been a secret for a long time. I guess the cat's out of the bag now, but this would be the equivalent of that cut on a piece of beef. So again, just a really lovely little extra steak, especially if you like a nice fat cap on your steak. Okay, so moving along from there, we can head into I can move this out of the way here.
Yeah, that's
I
part of
can't
that.
stop looking at these dendo steaks.
Okay.
We can start moving here into the rib section. Sorry, into the loin section. Sorry. So now we're into that loin section, right? So that as you're moving down from the truck into the rib, and now you hit the loin, the short loin, where you're going to be cutting your sirloin steaks, your New York strips, obviously the big ones from there. You want to just tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here, Jose?
Okay, so normally as the prime cuts, how I get when we get the whole animal is that I get the New York strip, attach it to the sirloin. So basically, what you see on the side is where it's the sirloin. That's the sirloin steak. That's a sirloin steak that you get from 1/8 of the animal, and that's about 1 inch and a quarter thick. Each steak is like around 1 pound or so. Follow it by the New York strip, which that's the number you can get from one side of the animal if you cut it an inch thick, and then follow it by the flank 2 pieces. There's a flank steak split in half, which is 2 pieces showing on the picture, and follow it by this piece that we're gonna cut it in a minute. This is bavette, and then the filet mignon. Oh, sorry, she's gone. The filet mignon. So yeah, the tenderloin. So we get the 8 pieces of tenderloin, which is around 6 ounces each. That's what you get from one side of animal. And also the same bones, some bones in there also. And
still lots to grind.
still we get some of which was 5 pounds, around 5 to 6 pounds of gram meat. We get after we get all the steaks.
Yep.
And then some bones.
So just quickly, because we need to keep moving here.
Yeah.
So this is the bavette. I know it's also called the flap, right? The sirloin flap. Is that correct? And where is this coming from?
Okay. So this piece taste, to me, it tastes almost similar as a
Skirt.
skirt steak.
Sort of like a giant skirt steak. If we can get a close up of this, it has these incredible. You can see the grain, very distinct grain of meat here. It's quite a lot thicker and bigger than the skirt steak.
Yes. Okay. So if this starts on the bottom, all right. So is the skirt steak. Going up is the fillet. So this is like basically connected to the filet mignon.
Okay.
So to remove the filet mignon, you have to remove this one first in order to get the whole piece.
Okay.
Yes. And then also this thin part connects to the sirloin, which is the picture showing, you know, the end of the, yes. So this is basically the connection between the sirloin, the filet mignon goes underneath it.
And the skirt below.
Yeah, skirt
Okay.
steak, which it follows. It continues to the, you know, too bad we don't have a whole lot more to show here. Yeah, so
this thing whole, we've taken a little piece off here, but this thing whole is about 4 pounds or so at least, that you could then cut right into smaller.
yeah, basically what we've been doing, Adam, is we've been cutting this on, all depends on the size of the animal, but normally we get around like 10 to 11 ounces each. So we get 3 pieces of 11 ounces from one side.
It's much thinner
Thinner, so we're
here, so you cut a larger piece down there.
basically you feel by feeling it was, I would say this will be like I would say that this will be like 10 ounces.
Excellent.
And then normally the middle part is a little bit heavier. So that would be my other 10 ounces.
Yep.
I don't have the
This
scale.
whole thing here.
Yeah, so this, because I need to get that bigger in order to get another 10 ounces.
Sure. But again, incredible steak, obviously, and you'll see this when we cut into it. Really important to cut against the grain here. If anyone ever was confused as to what it means to cut some meat against the grain, this is the best way to show it, is because you can see this incredible grain, the alignment of the fibers. So you would cut this perpendicular for this incredibly tender, kind of melt in your mouth, falling apart steak. All right, so with that in mind, there's one last section we want to get to before we start to wrap things up here, and that is the hindquarter. Right, so this is as you can see from this picture, there's a gold mine of product in that leg, that last the hindquarter of a beef cow. And we've just got a couple of examples here of some things that we get excited about pulling out of this out of a leg. Jose, you want to just quickly walk us through this?
Okay, so same thing. I will have to say that Paul and I, we've been working on this, and I can show you. So this would be continue part of going down from the sirloin. So what we have it there is a whole leg. So we have on the first line we have like 6 ossobucos.
Yep.
And then we go into London broils.
We
London broil
yeah,
steaks.
so we have the top round, which normally gets if get turned into roast beef. So in this case, we cut it into London broils. We have few pieces of London broils from that piece, and one is steak, which is on the side. Basically one piece of roast, I would say, from the same top round. Little bit up next to that, we have those after we debone the bottom part of the leg. Also, we have some marrow bones. On the top, we have the pot roast, which is the bottom round roast, followed by a I'll read a small. Sorry.
What do we got there? So
Next.
that's the peel knuckle steaks, right? We've got just to the right of the bones.
Oh yes, so yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we have those peel knuckle steaks, and then followed by the high round steaks, mini steaks.
Yeah, so
yes.
yeah, like little cube steaks or little
You made
iron
it
steaks
something
or
like fried.
fried steak. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we had those, and then we have some ground meat, Also followed by some stew meat. We turn from the same part after we have done all those steaks. We have some stew meat, some bones, and then I can talk about this piece of picanha steak, which is part of the leg, but it's really connected to the pod roast. So you cut the front part. If you can go back to the picture, see the pod roast, the straight cut. What I did.
Yep.
This is the front part of it.
Okay, all right.
So
So that's also the sirloin, what's known as the sirloin cap.
exactly,
Or
the sirloin
sometimes,
tip.
or
It's a-
sometimes will be called a culotte as well.
it-
And then
there's
the
a nice bit.
very famous cut of meat from you see in Brazil and Argentina, it is called the picana. And
Okay.
Many would consider one of the most desirable cuts of meat, especially if you like a nice fat cap on your steak.
Okay, and so that's this piece, and then we have this the merlot steak, which is
The Merlot steak, right? Again, something that is you got to kind of know where you're going to get this piece of meat. So tell us a little bit about the Merlot. Where is that from?
okay. So right before I cut the sabuco, this sits on the very cap of the. Once you remove all the big pieces, the bottom round, the top round, the eye round. Once you the pill knuckle, once you remove all the steaks, right under those pipes of marrow bones that was showing on the picture is this guy, which is sits on the very top of the whole cap of the leg of the shank.
Okay.
So once you remove this, then you can cut it all the rest into ossobucos,
So
and which is
usually
this
if you don't remove this would usually just get left on the ossobuco.
left and between the two joints, the ossobuco, or like honestly only like this part of it will go in the ossobuco,
Yeah.
and this part will get turned into brine.
Okay.
So
Okay.
half of it goes into ossobuco, half of it will get turned into.
So this is probably about 1.5 pounds. Beautiful steak. I mean, you can just see it almost looks like a flank steak, right? It really has that same shape, the same
Exactly.
kind of profile of a flank steak.
Yeah.
Super delicious and tender as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Um,
tender. Yeah.
So what are you gonna say?
No, I said it's so tender. One of the most tender
okay. You
steaks.
wanted to show how we cut a steak. Um, this could be cooked whole, roasted whole. If you ever go to like an Argentinian or Brazilian churrasco restaurant where they bring the huge sort of spear of meat, it's usually these pieces cooked whole.
Really
Or
let
you
that,
could cut them into individual steaks if you wanted to.
yeah,
Yeah.
really let that cap of fat just like melt into the
Oh,
meat. Like
God.
finding a way to cook it that way.
Exactly.
That's it, yeah.
So normally when I cut these guys is as you can see, I always said you got to see how the lines are running. If it's like my hair, all right? Yeah, I always compare. Try to explain to people saying you have to cut it like you have to do like if you brush your hair up, the hair is gonna go up. It's like it's gonna if you brush your hair up, all right, it's not gonna keep it flat. So the same thing on the meat. So if you what do you want to do? See where the lines are going. So normally I always run my knife first. I want to check, make sure if I'm cutting the right, you know. So if I go in this way, the meat keeps nice and flat. If I'm going this way, look what it starts looking at it.
There you go.
So that's
Your
how it is.
takeaway, your tip for the day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I always guide for it when I'm cutting steaks, especially in these smaller steaks.
Yeah.
All right, so you're getting all those steaks cut out of there. Incredible. All right, so we don't have too much time left. So what we'd like to do, I don't know if we can change the angle here of the camera. And we get Paul's cutting board here. So what we're going to do here is to we cooked off one representative steak of some of these cuts that we were talking about. The first is is some of the Denver steak here, a few pieces of Denver steak that Paul is cutting into. We'll then take some of that. There you go, Paul. Perfect. You can see. So we have the Denver steak here. And I was, it seems kind of unfair that only 3 of us get to taste all this meat here. And I wish that we could be handing out tastings to everyone here.
Come on in here,
In lieu
Bonnie.
of that, we have Bonnie over here from Stone Barns, who is more than welcome to taste with us. So you can see this is a steak here that, we're cooking it medium rare. It's really like quite a wonderful piece here. So let me give you a few pieces of this. I'd invite other people up as well. There's a very small group of people here. So Bonnie, here, I'm going to give this to you in pieces. Okay, so then give me
Yep.
some of that there. Excellent. Okay, so there's that. And then you want to give me a piece of the, looks like a piece of duck breast. Right, so
So
the
funny.
vet, my personal favorite. I can give her a little bit more than that.
All right.
They're cheap. All right. All right. And then let's get a
There we
piece of the picanha steak over there as well. So put that there. So Bonnie, I don't know if they're going to have the camera on you while you're doing this, but
Bonnie, it's all on you.
there you
What are you
go.
gonna
So
say?
Bonnie gets to try that. Have a fork over there. So you've got Merlot, the ribeye cap, Babette, and picanha over there. Jose, would you like some as well? All right, so
I'm
just
okay.
in wrapping things up here, I think the point is, as we go, if I just go back to the slideshow, when you look at these pictures, that section of the hind quarter, when you look at the loin section, the rib section, and the chuck section, you really see a world of possibilities out there that are probably really expand our definition of how to, expand our definition of what the cuts are that we get out of a whole carcass, and kind of shows us some of the incredible stuff that maybe we're not seeing, and that it really kind of behooves us to be exploring a little bit more about. And for us, I think kind of just in conclusion, it really speaks to the need for being able to spend time. Number one, having great meat, having people like Claire in this world, and I'm sure there are many people in this audience who are doing similar work to Claire and the rest of the livestock team here at Stone Barns. People who really are making decisions long before this meat even gets to the slaughterhouse, let alone to the butchering facility, around genetics and breed and pasture management and the kind of time and effort that it takes to bring this incredible carcass in. To then have an unbelievably skilled, knowledgeable butcher, somebody who's knowledgeable in the art of whole animal butchery, who's really able to identify these. And then we start bringing in cooks and chefs to start learning about this. And ultimately, it falls on all of our shoulders, from the farmers to the butchers to the chefs, to really start getting these ideas out there and really start popularizing, as with many food, I'm not going to say trends, because they really aren't trends anymore. There's many foods that we kind of now, I think back 20 years ago when Blue Hill first opened, and we had a hanger steak on a menu, and in this country, not a whole lot of people knew what a hanger steak was, and there were a few restaurants out there, probably on the menu, because it was a pretty cheap kind of meat back then.
Yeah.
It's not so cheap anymore. But the point is that kind of meat is something that is really kind of infiltrated, certainly restaurant menus, where probably didn't do so before. I think the other really important thing, and I neglected to mention this earlier, is that there's a lot to be learned, actually, also looking at the way other cultures cut meat. For example, the fact that in Brazil and Argentina, picanha is so highly coveted, and for good reason. Just the way other cultures cut meat and extract different parts of the animal, I think there's a lot to be learned as well. That we have sort of become so, certainly in the States, we've become so accustomed to, as I say, going back to the beginning, these usual suspects, and that's what the expectation is. Well, we really have the power, we have the opportunity to really rewrite that expectation and really redesign what that meat case ultimately looks like.
Absolutely. And I think it's, the bavette's a perfect example. We bring up the skirt steak flavor profile, the hanger steak that you just said. This should not be in a retail case, or sorry, the hanger steak and a skirt steak shouldn't be in a retail case unless this is their ricket.
Right
The versions like, you only get so many skirts and so many hangers out of one animal, but you get
Exactly.
way more bavette, and like that skirt's gone. Someone already bought it, and it's like, I got something just as good, maybe even better. I mean, like that's where it's got to be. And so each of those cuts have to have a corresponding offcut to it, and they're there. So it's just us finding it, and putting it out there, and educating.
Jose, you get the last word. Any final thoughts about this, or from somebody who cuts all this meat all day long?
Uh, what I have
Putting you
to
on the spot.
what I have to add to this is it's just, I'm very excited that the things that we were working on, Paul and I, and to share people out there to see those pictures, that how much just half of the animal, how much it takes and how much meat
Yeah.
you can get at it. That
Yep.
makes me really excited, and hope is that, and dream is that in the future will be more people encouraging like how much we can get out of one animal, and rather than just going, like you guys been saying, going into store and just asking for ribeye. So everyone would learn this. It would be amazing, so when I go to the store, I know exactly what I want to eat it. So if everyone knows, if everyone gets educated about how much you can get it, like the things that what you want to get it, you go to the store and ask for it, and they have it, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
But if I go to the store and I ask, I want to eat this part of the animal, if they don't have it, so what is my choice? Get the ribeye or get those pieces. So the dream is that from this, most of the people will get it, and of course, like you were saying, the dream is to have this in the shops, in the supermarkets or stores, so when I go to the store and get one of the, if I want to eat picanha or bavette steak,
There,
it's there.
right next to the ribeye. and the
Exactly.
grilling.
So that's the one of
All right,
the
so that's,
things would be.
that's we all have work to do here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's work that involves deliciousness. And I think when you can drive with deliciousness on here, I think the rest will start to come. But thank you all very much, and thank you to Jose and Paul for participation in this.
Okay.